What's up everyone, my name is the Francois, and today I'm going to show you everything you need to know about Voicemeeter. Alright guys, before we get started, I do want to let you guys know that this is not a setup tutorial. This is an overview or a masterclass on Voicemeeter. In this video, I'm going to be showing you Voicemeeter Potato, everything you need to know about Voicemeeter Potato, from the user interface to Midi Mapping to faders, recording, special effects, all that stuff that is included on Voicemeeter that you might otherwise not know how to set up. If you're using Voicemeeter Banana or the base version of Voicemeeter and you see something in this video that you don't have on your application, that means you need to utilize the Voicemeeter Potato application in order to gain access to what I talk about in this video. While following along with this video, if there's anything I explain poorly or you get confused at any point, feel free to reach out to my staff team in my Discord server for additional support for anything that's talked about in this video. You're also welcome to tweet at me on Twitter. Both of those links are in the description below. If you guys have any creative uses or would like to see a specific video done with Voicemeeter, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. And with that being said, we're going to jump right into this video. The first thing I want to discuss with you guys is the download options available on vb-audio.com. What you'll notice when you download something from vb-audio, whether it be Voicemeeter, Voicemeeter Banana, or Voicemeeter Potato, you'll notice that all three versions of Voicemeeter will be downloaded onto your computer. When you download Voicemeeter Potato, you want to make sure that you're opening the Voicemeeter Potato application instead of the base version or the Banana version of Voicemeeter in order to use that version. Next up, I do want to talk about the virtual audio cable. The virtual audio cable is another virtual device that we can use on our computer. There is a second free option as far as virtual audio cables go, and that is the hi-fi cable. The hi-fi cable is a bit perfect virtual audio cable. In a lot of cases, it might not be compatible with your system. The hi-fi cable is typically used with interfaces and that sort of thing. It also comes with an ASIO bridge. It's a very useful tool for some of you, so consider checking out the hi-fi cable as well. Or if you need an additional virtual audio cable, downloading that hi-fi cable might be an option for you as well. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Spectralisime. This is an EQ analyzer or a spectrum analyzer for you. You can utilize this to analyze the frequency range and the volume levels of specific sources. So it's a very useful tool. I'm sure some of you can figure out ways that you would like to utilize that, so I wanted to mention that this is an option with Voicemeeter as well. Alright, I quickly want to summarize everything that is on the Voicemeeter Potato user interface. The user interface is everything that's displayed in front of you here. On the left side, we have the hardware inputs. So in the hardware input section, we can set up things like microphones or our virtual audio cable that we downloaded from the website. And we can kind of trick the hardware input section into using that virtual audio cable as a hardware input so that we can send things like our Chrome source or our soundboard source into that hardware input section. And that way we can have our own audio slider for that specific source. In the middle of the application, we have our virtual audio sources. There we have three different virtual inputs. So we have the Voicemeeter VAIO input, Voicemeeter aux VAIO, and Voicemeeter VAIO 3. These three inputs are playback devices on our computer, meaning that we can set up these three sources as default playback sources on our computer or default communication sources on our computer. We can also use them as a source for the output on certain applications, that sort of thing. On the top right, we have our hardware output section. This is obviously the opposite of the hardware input section. In the hardware output section, we can select hardware on our computer, anything from speakers, headphones, that sort of stuff. Directly below that, we have what is called a tape recorder. In the tape recorder, we're allowed to record specific sources on Voicemeeter. We can also play back those recordings and send them to any of the sources that we want to send them whether it be a hardware output or a virtual output, using the selections that are available there. To the right of the recorder, we have a special effects section. In the special effects section, we can set up things like reverb and delay to play on our audio sources. This is a way we can add some cool artistic effects to our audio. And last but not least, below that is the master section. Here we'll find our outputs on Voicemeeter. On the left side of the master section, A1 through A5 is our hardware outputs. So we have faders for each one of our hardware outputs. We also have EQ and some other settings that we'll talk about later in this video. And to the right side of the master section, we have our virtual outputs, B1 through B3. Same thing, we have the same adjustments for each one of those outputs available in that master section. Now that we understand a bit of the user interface of Voicemeeter, I want to talk about the hardware input selections, the hardware output selections, and how they all interact together. The first thing you need to do when opening Voicemeeter, you probably have already done this, is you need to select an A1 source on your computer. The A1 source is going to be hardware outputs, so speakers, headphones, that sort of stuff. Generally, I suggest that you set up your main output source in this A1 selection. So what I have here is my speakers. I can unplug my headphones from those speakers or plug the headphones back in. I have one source in my A1. If you have more than one source, you can set them up in A1, A2, A3, A4, and A5 and have 5 different hardware outputs that you can utilize for each one of your sources on Voicemeeter. What you'll notice when you hit the drop down on these selections is you have typically 3 different selections for each source. You have WDM, KS, and MME, and below that you have ASIO. These are 3 different driver types for each one of those audio sources. Typically, depending on the operating software that you're using, WDM is going to have the lowest latency for Windows users. MME is going to have a bit of a higher latency because it has a higher buffering time, but in some cases you'll need to utilize an MME driver to help with the amount of processing time available for that audio. That way you don't have issues with robotic sounds, crackling, that sort of stuff. And the fastest of all the audio drivers is going to be the ASIO audio driver. That's going to be the closest to zero latency that you can get as far as audio drivers go. After you make your hardware output selection, you can go ahead and begin setting up your hardware inputs. What I typically do is set up my microphone on the hardware input 1, and that's what you see here. Below each one of these inputs, what you'll notice are selections for A1 through A5, B1 through B3. These A1 through A5 selections here will send audio from this audio source to one of the hardware output selections that you have up here. As far as the B1 through B3 selections, these are going to be virtual outputs that are on our computer. B1 through B3 sources are installed when we install Voicemeeter Potato. They aren't displayed on this interface. They're only shown up in the master section here on the bottom right, B1 through B3. We can make adjustments to the audio for those sources specifically, and then we can set up those sources as input devices on applications, things like Discord or whatever, or we can utilize them as default recording devices on our computer, which is typically what a lot of people do when they route their microphone through Voicemeeter. Same thing with the virtual inputs. You have the selections on where you want to route this audio, and then you can make adjustments to each one of those audio sources with the fader gain and the selections down here. I want to talk a little bit about the other options that are available for these inputs. So first we'll start with the hardware inputs. We have something here called the IntelliPan. On the IntelliPan, the first thing that shows up is a color panel. On the color panel, this is kind of a cheating way to do some EQ. With this dial here, you can move this to the left and add some more lows to your voice. You can move it to the right to add some more mediums, and then you can raise it up to add more highs to your voice. Above this line will create an echoing or a doubling effect to your vocals and add what is called brightness. Now, if you right click on the color panel, you'll have a modulation panel. In the modulation panel, you will create a robotic-y kind of sound. You'll just modulate and warp the voice. It's a fun little tool. If you're interested in playing around with that, feel free. Again, you can right click and we have what is called a 3D panel. You can move this dot from the left and to the right, and this will adjust the location of the sound. And then if you pull it away from the left or to the right, this will adjust how far the sound is in that position. So that's another cool panel if you're interested in creating some effects there. And then you right click again and it will bring you back to the color panel. Below the IntelliPan, we have the audibility section. On the left side, we have a compression. This compression is built in with an auto makeup gain. So when you increase this dial, it's not only going to compress the audio of this source, but it's also going to increase the volume with an auto makeup gain. So if you increase your compression on this source, you'll want to make sure that you lower the volume of the source with the fader down here. You can also double click on the dial to reset it. On the right side of the audibility section, we have a noise gate. This will block out certain audio at a floor level. When you increase this, it will cut out the lower audio from your audio source. What you'll notice is the higher you go, the higher the floor volume for that audio source is. Below that is special effects and external effects. We'll talk more about that in a different section of this video. Now we have some selections on each one of these inputs I do want to talk a little bit about. The mono button is going to make this source a mono channel. A solo button will isolate this audio source, so it will mute all other sources from playing audio. And then last but not least, you have the mute button below that. You also have a limiter built into Voicemeeter. So if you left click on the analyzer section for the source and then drag down, you can create a limiter for that audio source, which will block the audio from exceeding a certain decibel value. On each one of your virtual inputs, you have an equalizer where you can increase the treble, you can increase the mids, and you can increase the bass. And below that, you have a position panel as well to adjust where that audio is coming from. And same thing, if you left click in the analyzer section and drag down, you have a limiter for each one of these virtual inputs. Below that, you have a button for MC. MC stands for mute center. Mute center is really only useful if you're, I guess, recording or doing a voiceover for a movie. Typically, movies record the audio on track number 3. With the MC, you can mute that center track and do voiceovers of that. So that's a pretty nifty tool. But essentially, it mutes the center audio of your audio source. On that Voicemeeter aux input source, you'll notice the K button instead of an MC button. The K button is a karaoke button. There are 4 different options within the karaoke button. The K-M stands for karaoke voice remover. This will remove the common part of a stereo track material. All mono sound will be removed. The K-1 for some material, other sounds than voices can be removed. So the K1 mode will keep some bass and some treble. The K2, like the K1 mode, K2 mode will keep more bass and more treble. KV, if nothing works, like on a mono track, this last mode will simply remove the voice frequency range 200 to 4000 Hz by a simple filter. Also on these virtual inputs, you have the option to right click in this area to display up to 11 total audio sources. These audio sources on this display are pulled directly from Windows. Sometimes you have duplicates of audio sources within each of these virtual inputs, and it can get a bit confusing. This here will reflect the sounds found in the volume mixer on Windows down here. So when you adjust the volume of one of these, it will adjust the slider of the volume mixer on Windows. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is the options available in the master section. As I explained earlier, the master section hosts the hardware outputs and the virtual outputs and all of their available adjustments. What you notice is the A1 through A5 on the left side of the master section and the B1 through B3 on the right side of that master section. The A1 through A5 are going to be the faders and adjustments for the hardware outputs, and the B1 through B3 is going to be the faders and adjustments for your virtual outputs. You can adjust the speaker layout by using this square box here. If you just click through, you can select different speaker layouts for that source. The stereo repeat mode also allows to use master EQ as a crossover for 2, 3, or 4 ways active speaker system. So this will allow you to set the channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 within the EQ to adjust highs, mids, and lows or bass for specific speaker layouts. So if you have an advanced speaker layout or you have advanced speaker options, you can adjust the specific EQ ranges using the stereo repeat button and the EQ on the master section. I also want to talk about the composite mode for the master section outputs. The composite mode is made for audio post-production. The 8 channels of the bus can be composed by any pre-fader or post-fader inputs. You can find these pre-fader and post-fader inputs from the system settings dialog box, which is found within the menu on Voicemeeter. With the composite signal, it's possible to record up to 8 channels composed by any Voicemeeter input or with a DAW connected to Voicemeeter Virtual ASIO. Or you can also use the integrated recorder on Voicemeeter. It allows recording VoIP interview or conference and making the post-production process after, with up to 8 different tracks. You can pause this video to begin to understand how to use these pre and post faders with the composite mix on those outputs. Below that, you have the special effects. We'll talk more about that in a later section of this video. Mono is going to make this a single or mono stereo layout. And then you have EQ, the EQ button to turn it on. You left click it. In order to make adjustments to this EQ, you have to right click on that EQ button. And here you can make adjustments to the EQ of that source. A button here on the left of the EQ that will flatten that EQ curve. You have 2 different EQ curves that you can create and that will save. So you have the A and the B, and then you can go in and independently adjust each channel if you so choose. And then below that obviously is a mute button. So if you want to mute the A1 source, you can just click that button there. Or if you want to adjust the volume of the source, you can just adjust this slider here. The next thing we're going to talk about is the special effects. So in the special effects panel over here, the first thing we need to do is turn on the effect that we want to have on, whether it be reverb or delay. You can just left click it, or if you want both, you can left click both. If you want to adjust the actual settings of each one of these, you can right click on it. In here, you have the settings for each one of these options. So with the reverb, you can have vocal, church, stadium, club, soft pipe, special kind of reverb. You can adjust the dryness, the wetness, the delay, the decay, all kinds of different stuff within this panel. Say you want the reverb on your hardware input 1, the first thing you need to do is toggle the post button on that reverb and then adjust the amount of reverb using that dial there. Now, in order to adjust the actual output of that reverb, you need to adjust the dial for reverb in the master section. So if you're sending this audio to say your A1 source, you can adjust the reverber here, or you can have it sent to your A5 source, or you can have it sent to your virtual sources, that sort of thing. And what you'll notice is now that audio from my microphone is being sent to that source via reverb. Same thing with the delay. You can toggle the post button here, adjust the amount of delay, and then add the delay in via the dial in the master section. If you're using an ASIO device, you can take advantage of the external FX return with these dials here. Simply turn these on you'll go to your menu, go to the system settings. Here you can patch those external FX using these send and return options here. I don't have an ASIO device hooked up to my computer or my Voicemeeter, so I can't really display this. Just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of this option. The next thing I wanted to talk about on Voicemeeter is the recorder right here. This is actually a very powerful tool that I use from time to time if I want to record a specific sound or a segment from a video, something like that, so I can save it for later or use it as an audio file for a podcast or something. Whatever you think that you can utilize a recorder for, this here can record any of our buses or sources on Voicemeeter. So if you right click on the actual recorder here, you have the options for pre-fader inputs, so we can select here what we want to record on this recorder here. So we can have the hardware input 1, the hardware input 2, or the virtual input 1, virtual input 2, and we can record all of those at once. Same with the post faders. If we want to catch the outputs, we can record the A1 source, the B1 source, so on and so forth. Below that, we can select where the files from this recorder are going to be saved from the target directory here. So this is the file location for all of my audio files from this recorder. And then below that, we have the file type. I suggest recording as a WAV file, and you can adjust how you want to record, whether you want the sample rate to be 4400 hertz or 96K, so on and so forth. You can also change the bit resolution and the number of channels, so on and so forth. Below that, we have a play on load. So this means when you load a file into the recorder, it will automatically play it. We have a loop. That means when you play a file in the recorder, it's going to continuously play that file. You can adjust the fader for the recorder here, and then stop record after a certain duration is an option as well. Now, if we go back to the recorder here, all we need to do in order to record via the settings that we just set is by clicking this recorder button. When we're done recording, we can hit either pause if we want to continue recording after, or we can go ahead and hit stop to finalize that recording. Once we finalize the recording, we can select where we want to send that audio, if we want to monitor it or we want to share it with others, that sort of thing. So if I want to hear it myself, I can toggle the A1 and I can press play, and it will play that audio back to me. Now, if I want to send that audio file to, say, a virtual output, I can do that as well, and then again go ahead and hit play, and it will play that audio file back to me. And you'll notice in that B1 source, the audio played there. That's because we're sending it to that B1 source. Now, if we want to eject this recording and have it saved in our files, what we need to do is go to our menu and click eject cassette. That will eject that recording, and that will save it in our files in the target directory that we selected earlier. So then you can go name that file, put it in your sound effects section, put it in your music section, whatever you got to do. And that's how you record using that recorder. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is VBAN. VBAN is a virtual network that Voicemeeter installs onto your computer. This allows you to send audio sources from your computer over your virtual network or over your internet to a different Voicemeeter application on a different computer. So if you click on this VBAN button up here, it will open the VBAN window. In order to send streams to a different computer or a different Voicemeeter application, you first need to make sure that the source is toggled on. You want to select the actual source of the outgoing stream that you're going to utilize. So any, bus A1 through A5 or bus B1 through B3. And then you can go ahead and give that stream a name. And you want to send it to the IP of the Voicemeeter that you want that stream to go to. You can grab the IP of the other Voicemeeter from the VBAN window up at the top. You'll notice the IPs up here that I have blocked out because I don't want you guys to see my IP. And that's how you send streams from VBAN to a different computer, you want to make sure that your VBAN is on when you do this. If you want to accept streams from a different Voicemeeter application, you can do so from the incoming streams section. Same thing, you want to make sure it's on. You can give it a stream name, and you want to put the IP address from the IP of that computer or Voicemeeter application in this IP address form. And then you can adjust, the sample rate, the channel, the format, and that sort of stuff in that section. And then last but not least, the destination of the incoming stream. So you can set it to your physical input 1 through 5 or the virtual inputs 1 through 3 using the destination selection here. The next thing I want to talk about is Midi mapping with Voicemeeter. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any Midi devices that I can show you how to use Midi mapping, but if you're interested in Midi mapping, you probably understand how to utilize it. In order to get to the Midi mapping window, you can do so from the menu and clicking Midi mapping. Midi stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It's a technical standard that describes a certain protocol with digital interface and electrical connectors that will connect a wide range of instruments or audio devices or computers for editing and recording music. That is what Midi is used for. For instance, if you have a piano hooked up to your computer, you can Midi map it with Voicemeeter in order to optimize the way you edit or record that audio from your piano. The next thing I want to talk about is some of the options that are hidden here in the menu. So in the menu, some important ones are running the application on Windows Startup. Another one is auto restart audio engine, that sort of stuff. You could also toggle, the system tray. So if you want to minimize this to the system tray, you can go to the menu and click the system tray button. If you want the app to show when you start up your computer, you can toggle this here. You can set it to where this application is always visible. I really don't suggest it. The next one here is you can actually lock the user interface on Voicemeeter, meaning you can lock it so that nothing can get adjusted. That way you don't accidentally switch things up when you don't need to using that button there. There's some other things as well. You can create macro buttons using the macro buttons that are built in with Voicemeeter. You also have some cool options here like an 8x8 matrix, a 15-band graphic equalizer, and then a MIDI VBAN converter as well. Now these things actually have to be open for them to work properly, and that's kind of why I didn't cover the information on those. A 15-band equalizer is just like the EQ that's available in the master section, except for it's a graphic EQ and it has knobs for specific frequency ranges. If you're interested in that sort of EQ instead of the EQ that's available in the master section. You can hook certain volume keys using the shortcut key in the menu. So for instance, if you have volume keys on your keyboard, you want to make sure you hook those volume keys by toggling hook volume keys for level output A1, which is going to be your main volume source. And last but not least, the last important option here is the system settings. Here you're going to get a good overview of everything that is running on your computer, from patch inserts, from patch composites, from physical inputs to virtual outputs, all on this window here. You can also adjust the buffering size for your audio drivers. You can adjust the preferred sample rate, that sort of stuff from this window. All right, and last but not least, I want to talk about the virtual control panels that are available with Voicemeeter. When you download Voicemeeter, it installs these automatically. You have a control panel for each one of your virtual sources. So if you open up this control panel, you can make adjustments to the sample rate. You can make adjustments to the latency. You can also diagnose some of the issues that are going on with that specific virtual source from this window. That's going to be everything that I cover in this masterclass section, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more content just like this. If you guys are looking for a cool tool to utilize with Voicemeeter, I built a virtual audio mixer using Touch Portal and the Voicemeeter Pickle plugin that was built for Touch Portal. I will link the video to that in the description below. If you guys need any further help, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, join my Discord server, ask my community for any assistance regarding any of the information talked about within this video. And with that being said, guys, I want to thank you again for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.